Reviews are in. A tour de force, inspiring, compelling, a story for our times, filled with hope. No, these are not reviews for the latest production of the Metropolitan Opera or the latest Broadway hit. This is what rabbis and cantors say about this week's Torah portion. Okay, to be honest, this is what I say about this week's Torah portion, Ve'et Hanan, from the book of Deuteronomy. But if I ask my colleagues, I have no doubt that is what they would say. This Torah portion has it all. So much of what makes Judaism, well, Judaism is in this Torah portion. We have a retelling of the 10 Commandments. Don't get excited, there are still 10. This was followed by one of the basic themes of Deuteronomy and what would become a core tenet of Jewish belief, the Shema. There is a God, there is only one God, and we have a unique relationship with God. We read the first paragraph of the Ve'ahavta. We are then reminded that all we have is not only as a result of the work of our own hands, but of God and those who came before us. And finally, we are reminded never to become complacent. At the beginning of the portion, Moses, almost out of character, recalls how he pleaded with God. Let me, I pray, cross over and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, the good hill country. Of course, Moses is rebuffed, knowing that he will not accompany the Israelites, and in fact, that his days are coming to an end. Much of Deuteronomy is Moses' farewell speech. It is an ethical will, a to-do list, a bit of history, and some do's and don'ts wrapped up in a series of discourses. I am reminded of the words we say to loved ones when they leave the house, even to run a simple errand. Do you have an umbrella? It might rain. Did you take your shopping list? Drive carefully. When will you be home? Moses was a prophet unlike others. He was a prophet of action and only reluctantly one of words. He did not stand apart from the people, but he was right there with them in the thick of it. I could not help but be reminded of another prophet. We do not often make use of such imagery in Judaism, but this week, John Lewis crossed over to the good land, to the good hill country. We like to say the age of prophecy is over, but perhaps there are so few these days, we can hardly recognize them. Or like our ancestors, they are around, but we choose not to see them. But if there ever was an American prophet, it was John Lewis. He experienced firsthand the worst our country had to offer, and his life was a testament to the American dream. The son of a sharecropper, Lewis grew up during segregation and the Jim Crow laws. His family called him a preacher and thought he would go into politics. And though he went into politics, I think it is safe to say that he still became a preacher. And though his parents wanted him to accept things the way they were and not to cause trouble, Lewis was inspired by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and he joined the civil rights movement. Like any good prophet, Lewis was arrested over 40 times. Lewis got into what he would famously call good trouble. And just like a prophet who knew his days were coming to an end, Lewis left one final discourse to be read on the day of his funeral. Like Moses, it's an ethical will, a to-do list, a bit of history, and some do's and some don'ts. It was published yesterday. You can read it online, or you can listen to it read by Morgan Freeman. If you do, have a couple of tissues handy, and don't say I didn't warn you. In his final words to us, the American people, Lewis writes this: "While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you have inspired us. You have filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you use your power to make a difference in our society." And like the prophet he was, Lewis recalls difficult days and cautions us when he writes, "Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful, nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society." What a to-do list for us. It is fitting that John Lewis was laid to rest the week we read this Torah portion. Of it, Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath, president from 1943 to 1973 of what was then the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, now the Union for Reform Judaism, wrote, "The Ve'ahavta is a call to action. We must not only remember God's mitzvot, but we must teach them to future generations. The essence of Torah is the vision of a just society. For Judaism gave mankind its first civil rights program. It was expressed in the Shema, the watchword of the Jewish faith. Hear, O Israel, Adonai, our God, Adonai is one." Rabbi Eisendrath concludes, "As God is one, mankind is one, for each is created equally in the image of God." The Shabbat after Tisha B'Av is called Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of consolation. While I am certainly saddened by Lewis's death, I am consoled by his legacy. I am comforted by these words of a true American prophet. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Ken Yiratzon. May this be God's will.